Hey, what is going on, guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the best top laners for patch 6.21. So first up is going to be Rumble. Right now, I feel like Rumble is one of the most reliable top lane champions that you can play. Whenever I play Rumble, I feel like it doesn't really even matter if I fall behind a little bit in the early game. Once you get to your core items, or once you get to the items of Sork Boots and Liandry's, that power spike is one of the best for any champions in the game, and it just makes Rumble such a strong pick because you don't even need too many items with him to be effective, and that means that he's going to have a really good early to mid game power spike. And if you do start team fighting with Rumble, once you hit level 11, then you're probably going to win that team fight most of the time as long as you can hit a good equalizer. He also can do really well against those AD carries who want to sit in the back line and just use their long range ultimates like Jhin and Misfortune. If those champions are channeling their ultimates in the back line and staying at a safe distance, then it's very easy for Rumble to just drop the equalizer on them and they can't sit in his ultimate. If they sit in his ultimate, then they're going to take a lot of damage and they're probably going to die. So he's a great pick against those meta AD carries right now. Now, when should you not pick Rumble? I would definitely look to pick him if your team is lacking team fight. He's one of the best team fighting top lane champions. Try to avoid Jace, Aurelia, and Riven. Those are the three matchups that he does struggle with a little bit. I feel like you can do well and you can go even in lane in most matchups with Rumble, because even if it is a harder matchup, you can farm with your E. But if you're not as confident on the champion, then just try to avoid those matchups because those champions can do really well against Rumble. And also, he's a pretty good pick if the enemy team is a little bit tankier. He is going to be building the Liandry's, and he's also going to get Sork Boots early on, so he does really well against a tankier team comp. Next up is going to be Pantheon. So right now, Pantheon is one of the best snowballing early game top lane champions. He can do really well against most of the meta top laners right now. For example, if he's going up against someone like a Kenan or even a Jace in the early game, those are two of the most picked top laners. He can poke them down and look for an early kill on them before they can really get any items and before they can deal with the Pantheon. As long as you can get a snowball going in the early game, and if you can get a kill in the laning phase, then you should pretty easily be able to snowball other lanes as well, because once you do hit level 6, you can put your lane in and just go base, look for a roam down mid or down bot lane, and if you can get a double kill bot lane or just get a kill mid lane, then the game is pretty much won as long as your team doesn't throw or something, because you'll be ahead yourself, your other lanes will be ahead, and it will be a pretty easy win from there on out. You can also take Ignite on him because he does have his ultimate, which you don't really need teleport on Pantheon. I would much rather recommend taking Ignite because it just allows you for more kill pressure in the laning phase. Now, when should you not pick Pantheon? So I would definitely pick him into almost anything if you're confident on the champion. I would try to avoid maybe York and Sion. Those two champions have a pretty good win rate against Pantheon. Sion can do pretty well because he does have his shield and he will just outscale Pantheon super hard in the mid to late game. So it is a little bit harder for him in those matchups, but as long as you can poke the opponent down at level 1 and look for an all-in at level 2, then you should win most matchups. And also, don't pick him if you're really lacking team fight. Pantheon does get outscaled and he's not the best team fight top lane champion, so if you only have early game champions on your team, then I wouldn't pick him unless you're really confident in your Pantheon, because come the mid to late game, you're probably going to get outscaled. Next up is going to be Aurelia. So like Rumble, Aurelia does have a very strong mid-game power spike, and you can take over a game with Aurelia if you can use that power spike to your advantage. So in the early game, she's not the best for the first few levels, but as long as you can survive those levels, farm up, get your Sheen, get your Trinity Force, then you can pretty much duel any other top laner in the game once you do have Trinity Force. If you do end up getting that 2-second stun off on your opponent when you're dueling them, the trade is pretty much won. She's also a great pick right now against like someone like a Kenan or a Rumble. She can do well in those matchups because she can end up rushing a Maw, and if you rush a Maw against a Rumble or a Kenan, then they can't really do too much in that matchup. She also is a great bruiser top laner. You only really need Trinity Force on her to be effective, and then you can go full tank after that. You can soak a lot of damage in team fights, but you're still going to be able to deal a lot of damage as well. Now, when should you not pick Irelia? Try to avoid Pantheon and Malphite. Those two champions can do pretty well. Pantheon can do well because he can just abuse Irelia's weak levels 1 through 3, and he can try to get a kill on her in the early game. And then as for Malphite, Malphite can slam the ground with his E, and that's going to reduce your attack speed by quite a bit, and you're not really going to be able to have much kill pressure against him in the laning phase. Also, don't pick if your team is like really lacking team fight. Kind of the same thing as Pantheon. She's not the best team fight top lane champion. She is a pretty good team fighter, but she does get outclassed by some of the other top laners. And if the enemy team does lock someone like a Gangplank, a Yasuo, a Gnar, a Kenan, or a Rumble, then if you're confident on your Irelia, look to pick her in those matchups because she can just stomp those matchups and get a really good snowball going. Next up is going to be Kenan. So right now, Kenan is one of the best, if not the best, teamfight top lane champions that you can play. I would say that the pressure he brings and the presence he brings in a mid to late game teamfight, if he has his flash up, is probably better than any other champion in the game maybe, because if you've got your flash up and you can look for that flash engage on the back line, you can solo carry teamfight super easily with Kenan. If you end up ulting the enemy AD carry or mid laner, then the chance of you burst them down are very high, and you can just solo carry so hard with this champion. He's a really good laning top laner as well. He is ranged, so there aren't really too many champions that just like hard counter him in the laning phase. He can at least go even and win most matchups in the top lane. He also does do really well against the low mobility AD carries like the Misfortune and like the Jhin, so if the enemy team does lock a immobile AD carry, then look to pick him for sure in that situation. Now, when should you not pick Kenan? The only champion that I would try to avoid is Janna. I feel like Janna does a really good job against Kenan because she can just knock him out of a team fight. Alistair can also do pretty well against Kenan, so try to avoid those two champions. Look to pick him though if the enemy team is fairly low mobility. We're seeing a lot of low mobility champions being played right now in both the mid lane and for AD carry, so he's a great pick in most scenarios right now. The matchups I would try to avoid are Irelia and Jarvan. Those two champions do pretty well against Kenan, and then look to pick him against a Gnar, a Jax, or even a Darius because he does outrange those champions, and it's pretty easy for him to just kite them around and just poke them down and eventually just all in them once they're around half HP. And to round out this video is going to be Jace. So right now, I feel like if you can play Jace correctly, he is the best top lane champion that you can play. He does really well right now against a lot of the meta AP top lane champions. So he does well against a Kenan, against a Rumble, because in those matchups, he can rush a Hex Drinker. And once he has that item finished, the Kenan and the Rumble, they can't do anything against the Jace. If they try to duel him, he can just all in them and burst them down. And if the enemy team does lock one of those two champions, then definitely look to pick Jace in the top lane. His snowball potential is also some of the best for any top laner. If you do get ahead with Jace in the early game, look to group up, look to siege down towers, because his QE combo can half health an enemy AD carry if you are fed with Jace. Another reason to why he's really good right now is because his tower pushing ability is insanely strong with his W. So if you do end up poking the enemy top laner out of lane, it's going to be very easy for you to go for that first blood tower. And because Jace does take towers super fast, you're probably going to find yourself getting first blood tower a lot of the time with the champion. And that's another reason to why he's super strong right now. He's also got a very good all-in burst combo. That combo did get buffed a few patches ago, which is another reason why he has become stronger and why he is a great pick. So when should you not pick Jace? Don't pick him if your team is like really lacking team fight, kind of like Irelia and Pantheon. He isn't like the best team fight top lane champion that you can play. So if your team has someone like a Nidalee jungle and like a Karma mid lane, then I wouldn't pick him in that situation. A few champions that I would look to avoid are Malphite, Yasuo, and Braum. The reason why Yasuo and Braum do really well against Jace is because they counter his poke damage pretty heavily with their shields. Like with the Braum E and the Yasuo wind wall, it's going to be a lot harder for you to get that poke down if you do get ahead with Jace. And then Malphite, he will outscale Jace really hard in the late game, so if you don't get a really heavy lead on him in the early game, then it's going to be very hard for you to deal with that Malphite in a team fight. And he can also do pretty well in like most matchups right now. Like I said earlier, if you are practiced on Jace, then you can win most lanes for sure. And to round out this video, the honorable mentions are going to be Alawi, Yorick, Riven, Kayle, Malphite, Wukong, and Jarvan. So I want to take a look at Yorick and Jarvan for the honorable mentions here. Yorick is a champion to where at first when he got released, he wasn't that great after his rework. People didn't really know how to play him correctly, but I feel like over the past few days or past few weeks, people are finally understanding how to play the champion, and I've seen so many Yorick players just destroy lane recently. I saw a Yorick player a few days ago just absolutely stomp a Riven in lane, and he was pushed all the way up to like our base at around like 20 minutes into the game, and he just ended up solo carrying the game super hard. So if you know how to play Yorick, then I feel like he's a pretty good pick right now. And as for Jarvan, Jarvan is one of the most sleeper OP top laners that you can play right now. His all-in combo at level 2 with Ignite is one of the best for any top laners, and you can snowball super hard with the champion. I would definitely recommend going for the more assassin Jarvan build if you are going to play him in the top lane, because he's just a really good pick right now against those immobile AD carries, against the immobile mid laners, and if you go assassin Jarvan, then you can just delete them in a mid to late game team fight. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. If you did enjoy, then don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you guys have not already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.